Thunder Creek's old cattle barn smelled of hay, leather, and years of stories whispered through its wooden beams. The place was alive with the shuffle of boots and the low hum of men trading quiet remarks. Shafts of afternoon sunlight slipped through the cracks in the walls, casting long golden stripes across the packed dirt. In the center ring stood Midnight Storm, a massive black bull, his muscles rippling as he moved, his eyes sharp and unyielding. Travis Hollingsworth, the town's seasoned auctioneer, had been in the middle of his rhythmic chant when his voice faltered for the first time in decades. Midnight Storm wasn't scanning the crowd like most animals brought in for sale. His gaze was fixed on a single man kneeling near the far rail. Clay Harrison wasn't part of the auction staff, and no one in Thunder Creek could recall seeing him in town recently. He wore a dark jacket, weathered jeans, and a brown hat pulled low over his face. But it wasn't just his clothes, it was his stillness. In a barn full of movement, he was as steady as stone, his hand resting loosely on his knees. From her place in the second row, Daisy Ray Montgomery leaned toward Charlotte Whitmore. "That's Clay Harrison," she whispered.
"Thought he
left Thunder Creek for good." Charlotte didn't reply, her eyes locked on the slow, deliberate steps of Midnight Storm as the bull closed in. The air in the barn tightened. This was no docile animal. Its reputation for breaking gates and tossing men was well known. Yet instead of charging, the bull moved as if answering some invisible call. Near the back, Evelyn Grace Porter and Ruby Ann Colton exchanged uneasy glances. Bo McAllister, standing by the gate, gripped the railing, ready to act if things turned ugly. Travis's knuckles whitened around the microphone, his usual confidence slipping away. He knew this bull's temper, and he knew that Clay's presence in the pen was no accident. Still, the silence was suffocating. Even the restless shuffling of boots had stopped. Clay slowly raised a hand to the brim of his hat, tipping it slightly. His lips moved just one word, too soft for anyone else to catch. Midnight Storm's ears flicked, and the bull stepped closer until its breath stirred the dust at Clay's boots. The two stood locked in an unspoken exchange, the kind that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Then Clay rose to his full height. Midnight Storm didn't move. The crowd leaned forward, hearts pounding, as the barn seemed to hold its breath. In that moment, one thought echoed unspoken among them. Whatever history bound Clay Harrison and Midnight Storm, it was far from over. By the time Travis Hollingsworth brought the auction to a close that afternoon, the barn's usual energy had turned into a current of low, urgent whispers. Folks filed out in small groups, boots crunching on the gravel lot outside, their conversations circling back to the same subject: Clay Harrison. For years, Thunder Creek had lived on the story that he'd left town for good after a tragedy too heavy to talk about openly. Yet here he was, standing in the auction ring like he had never been gone, facing down Midnight Storm without a hint of fear. At the Hitching Post diner, Daisy Ray Montgomery slid into a corner booth with Charlotte Whitmore. She stirred her coffee without looking up. "He shouldn't be here," Daisy said finally. Charlotte, calm as ever, replied, "Maybe there's a reason." Daisy's eyes narrowed. "There's always a reason with Clay." Across the counter, Evelyn Grace Porter pretended to refill a sugar jar, straining to catch every word. The diner, like the barn, was buzzing with the news. Bo McAllister had taken a seat by the window, his Stetson resting on the table beside him. He'd worked enough rodeos to know that what happened with Midnight Storm wasn't normal. Clay hadn't just calmed the bull, he'd connected with it, like they shared some secret. When Ruby Ann Colton walked in, Bo called her over. "You saw it, didn't you?" Ruby nodded slowly. "Saw it, but I can't explain it. That bull looked at him like..." She trailed off, searching for the right words. Like they'd known each other forever. Back at the barn, Travis locked up the gates, his thoughts heavy. He'd been auctioning livestock for 30 years, and nothing had rattled him like today. Midnight Storm was trouble, pure and simple, yet the animal had stood still for Clay. That kind of thing didn't happen without history, painful history. Travis remembered a different time, long before Clay left town, when a younger Clay had been the best hand at the Hollingsworth Ranch. Something had broken back then, something that sent him away. That evening, the sun dipped low over Thunder Creek, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. Clay stood alone at the edge of an empty pasture, his hand resting on the top rail of the fence. In the distance, Midnight Storm stood in the shadows, watching him. The air was still, the kind of quiet that carries memories whether you want them or not. Clay's jaw tightened as a fragment of the past flashed in his mind, a roar of hooves, a scream, and the sound of something breaking that had nothing to do with bone. He didn't notice the figure approaching from behind until a familiar voice broke the silence. "You came back," Bo McAllister said softly. Clay didn't turn, his eyes still on the bull. "Not for long," he replied. But the weight in his voice told a different story, one Thunder Creek was only beginning to uncover. The next morning, Thunder Creek woke under a blanket of gray clouds. The streets were quiet, the air thick with the smell of rain on the horizon. At the Hitching Post Diner, Travis Hollingsworth nursed his coffee while scanning the local paper. He wasn't reading. Not really. His mind kept drifting back to the way Midnight Storm had stood before Clay Harrison, calm as a summer pond. He'd seen dangerous bulls before, but never that kind of stillness, not without years of trust built between man and beast. Across town, Clay stood in the weathered barn behind the old Harrison property, a place that had been locked up since he left Thunder Creek. Dust coated the wooden stalls, and the faint scent of hay lingered from years past. Bo McAllister stepped inside without knocking, his boots echoing in the emptiness. "You could have at least told someone you were back," Bo said, leaning against the post. Clay didn't look at him, didn't think anyone would care. Bo's jaw tightened. People care more than you think, especially after what happened that day. Clay's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Mo's words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ruby Ann Colton had always said the two men were like brothers, once inseparable until that one fateful afternoon. Rumors had filled in the gaps over the years. An accident during a rodeo, a death no one would talk about, and a fight that drove Clay out of town. Now, with him standing in front of Midnight Storm like no time had passed, the old whispers had come roaring back. Meanwhile, Daisy Ray Montgomery paid a visit to Charlotte Whitmore. They sat on Charlotte's porch, the rain beginning to patter softly on the tin roof. "You saw him yesterday," Daisy said. Charlotte nodded. "And I saw the way he looked at that bull. That wasn't just recognition, Daisy. That was grief." Daisy frowned. "Or guilt?" Charlotte didn't answer, but her silence spoke louder than words. That afternoon, Bo followed Clay out to the far pasture where Midnight Storm grazed. The bull lifted his head, watching them approach. "You need to tell me the truth," Bo said. Clay stopped walking, his back still to Bo. "Truth about what?" Bo's voice was low but sharp. "About why that bull trusts you. About why you disappeared after the accident." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and something darker tension, thick enough to taste. Clay finally turned, his eyes hard. "Some truths don't fix anything, Bo. They just tear open wounds that never healed." He glanced toward Midnight Storm, then back at Bo. "But maybe it's time you knew anyway." The rain had started to fall in steady sheets, drumming against the tin roof of the old barn. Clay Harrison stood just inside the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light outside. Bo McAllister leaned against a stall post, waiting for the words Clay had promised. Midnight Storm stood in the far corner, his dark hide slick with rain, watching them both like he understood the gravity of the moment. Clay exhaled slowly. It was the county rodeo, Thunder Creek's biggest day of the year. I was riding a bull named Iron Verdict, not Midnight Storm. But Midnight Storm was there, just a yearling then. You remember? Bo nodded once, his expression guarded. Clay continued, his voice low. You were in the chute with me. Travis Hollingsworth was announcing. Evelyn Grace Porter and Ruby Ann Colton were in the stands, and Daisy Ray Montgomery. She was right by the rail. Clay's eyes darkened. I made a mistake, a big one. I didn't tighten the flank strap right. The ride went bad, real bad. I hit the dirt. An Iron Verdict came for me. You tried to pull me clear, Bo, but it was someone else who stepped between us and those horns. Bo's jaw clenched. Charlotte Whitmore, he said, his voice breaking just slightly. Clay nodded. She was there to photograph the event for the paper. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the ring. But when she saw what was happening, she jumped in. She pushed me out of the way. Iron Verdict hit her instead. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. Clay swallowed hard. She didn't make it. Midnight Storm shifted in the corner, his hooves sinking slightly into the wet earth. Clay glanced at him. After Charlotte died, I couldn't stay here. Every inch of Thunder Creek reminded me of that moment. I left before the funeral. I didn't even say goodbye to anyone. Bo's voice was tight. You think running fixed it? You think disappearing made it easier for the rest of us? Clay shook his head. No, but staying would have killed me. He looked Bo in the eye. That yearling Midnight Storm, he was there when it happened. He saw her step in front of me. I swear he remembers. I've worked with a lot of bulls. Bo, but this one, he carries that day in his eyes, same as I do. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle. Bo stepped forward, close enough to meet Clay's gaze without the shadow of distance between them. Then maybe you came back for a reason, Clay. Maybe. That bull's not the only one waiting for you to face what you left behind. The morning sky over Thunder Creek was clear for the first time in days, but the air carried the weight of something about to happen. At the Hitching Post Diner, word had already spread Midnight Storm would be in the arena again that afternoon. Travis Hollingsworth had arranged for a special exhibition meant to draw a crowd and, hopefully, a high bid from an out-of-town buyer. But the moment Clay Harrison's name was mentioned in connection with the bull, the whole town started buzzing. Daisy Ray Montgomery sat at the counter, tapping her nails against her coffee cup. He's not really gonna step in there again, is he? She asked. Ruby Ann Colton, seated beside her, raised an eyebrow. You saw what happened last week. That bull listens to him. Daisy shook her head. Bulls don't listen. Not like that. This is something else, something we're not supposed to understand. Across the diner, Evelyn Grace Porter pretended to focus on her notebook, but her pen moved slower than usual. Bo McAllister found Clay outside the barn, leaning against the rail fence with his hat pulled low. You sure about this? Bo asked. Clay didn't look at him. Sure. No, but Travis says the only way to keep Midnight Storm from ending up in some meat lot is to show everyone he's worth more alive. Bo's gaze was steady. And you think that means climbing back into the ring? Clay gave a faint, humorless smile. Yes, I'm about to find out. When the afternoon sun hit its peak, the stands around the arena were packed. Charlotte Whitmore's name wasn't spoken, but her absence was felt in the tense silence before the event began. Travis's voice echoed through the speakers, but even he seemed uneasy as Clay stepped into the ring, his boots stirring up dust with each measured step. Midnight Storm was already there, muscles taut, nostrils flaring. The gates slammed shut behind them. The crowd expected a show of dominance, the usual display of man against beast. But Clay didn't carry a rope, didn't wave his arms, didn't shout. He simply stood still, watching the bull. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, Midnight Storm lowered his head and began to circle him, slow and deliberate. Gasps rippled through the stands when the bull stopped directly in front of Clay, their eyes locking as if no one else existed. From the announcer's booth, Travis cleared his throat, trying to fill the silence. But before he could speak, Midnight Storm took a single step forward, pressing his muzzle into Clay's chest. A hush fell over the arena. Somewhere in the crowd, Daisy whispered, "This isn't about the auction anymore." And she was right. Thunder Creek was about to witness something that had nothing to do with cattle and everything to do with the past. Clay had tried so hard to outrun. The arena was so quiet that Clay Harrison could hear his own breathing. Midnight Storm's massive head rested against his chest, the animal's hot breath rising in slow, steady waves. For a heartbeat, it felt like the two of them were standing alone in the world. But the silence didn't last. A sharp metallic crack shattered. The moment, the crowd's attention snapped toward the far end of the arena, where a section of the holding pen fence splintered under the weight of another bull and agitated, brindle brute that no one had planned to bring out today. Travis Hollingsworth's voice came over the loudspeaker, urgent and strained. "Keep your seats, folks, stay calm." But the bull in the broken pen had other ideas. Snorting and pawing the dirt, it charged through the gap, heading straight into the open arena. Bo McAllister was already moving along the rail, shouting for the gate hands to close off the exits, but the danger was clear. Two bulls in the same ring, one of them already keyed up for a fight. Daisy Ray Montgomery clutched Ruby Ann Colton's arm. "Clay's in there with no gear." Ruby's eyes never left the ring. "And he's not leaving," she said quietly. Evelyn Grace Porter, scribbling notes with trembling hands, muttered under her breath, "This is going to end bad if someone doesn't act fast." The brindle bull bellowed, lowering its head toward Midnight Storm. The black bull turned sharply, stepping away from Clay, his muscles coiling with instinct. Clay knew enough about bulls to recognize the moment before the charge. He stepped forward, not backward, putting himself directly between Midnight Storm and the oncoming brindle. The crowd erupted in shouts, but Clay's focus narrowed to the sound of pounding hooves and the flash of horns. He raised his arms, his voice cutting through the noise. "Storm!" The black bull froze, his head jerking toward Clay's voice instead of the rival. That split second was all Clay needed to shift his position, drawing the brindle's attention. Away. Bo swung himself over the fence, landing hard in the dirt. "You're insane," he shouted as he ran toward the chaos. Together, he and Clay angled themselves, using every bit of their experience to steer the brindle toward the open gate at the far end. Travis barked orders from the booth, and at the perfect moment, two ranch hands slammed the gate shut behind the charging bull. The danger was over, but only barely. Clay stood still for a long moment, his chest heaving, dust clinging to his face. Midnight Storm moved to stand beside him, calm once more, as if the danger had never been real. The crowd erupted in applause, but Daisy's voice cut through it all from the stands. "That wasn't luck," she said. "That bull trusts him more than anyone else in Thunder Creek, and now everyone knows it." By the time the arena cleared, the sun was sinking low, bathing Thunder Creek in a warm orange glow that felt out of place after the chaos. Clay Harrison stood near the back gate, brushing the dust from his jacket while Midnight Storm waited quietly beside him. The bull's calm presence drew more stares than Clay cared for. People weren't just curious, they were unsettled. Travis Hollingsworth approached, microphone still in hand, his voice low. "You saved a lot of folks from getting hurt today, but you also raised more questions than I can answer." In the stands, Daisy Ray Montgomery lingered with Ruby Ann. Colton and Evelyn Grace Porter. "Did you see the way that Brindle Bull went for him first?" Daisy asked, shaking her head. Ruby crossed her arms. "I saw a man step in where no one else would. Whatever's between him and that black bull is not normal." Evelyn jotted something in her notebook. "It's a story, that's for sure. Question is, how much of it Clay's willing to tell?" Bo McAllister joined Clay by the rail, his face still flushed from the heat of the ring. "You've got the whole town talking," Bo said. Clay didn't look at him. "Let them talk." Bo's voice sharpened. "You think this is just talk? Someone's gonna want answers, and not everyone's going to like the truth." Clay's eyes followed Midnight Storm as the bull was led back to the holding pen. "The truth's been here the whole time. Folks just didn't want to see it." That night, the Hitching Post diner was fuller than usual. Conversations were hushed but intense, with every table running through their own version of what happened. Charlotte Whitmore's name surfaced more than once, each mention met with uneasy glances. Daisy sat in the corner booth, her gaze fixed on the door, as if waiting for Clay to walk in. "If he came back, it's not by accident," she said. Ruby, sipping her tea, replied, "Then something's about to happen, and it's going to change this town." Across town, Clay sat alone, in the dim light of the Harrison barn. The smell of rain and dust clung to the air. He pulled a worn leather photo from his jacket pocket, a picture of Charlotte smiling, her camera slung over her shoulder. His thumb brushed across the image, his jaw tightening. Midnight Storm shifted in the stall nearby, letting out a low, rumbling breath. Clay whispered, "I know, I feel it too." Somewhere in the distance, a truck engine roared to life, breaking the night's stillness. Clay's head turned toward the sound, his eyes narrowing. Whoever was driving wasn't just passing through Thunder Creek. They were coming straight for him. The sound of the truck grew louder until its headlights cut across the gravel drive, leading to the Harrison barn. Clay Harrison stood in the doorway, the dim interior light casting his shadow long across the yard. The engine rumbled to a stop, and the door opened with a creak. Bo McAllister stepped out from behind the barn, his hand instinctively resting on the worn leather of his belt, not for a weapon, just the habit of a man ready for trouble. From the truck emerged Travis Hollingsworth, his hat pulled low against the night air. But he wasn't alone. A man Clay hadn't seen in years stepped down from the passenger side, a broad-shouldered stranger in a weathered coat, his face lined with the kind of experience that doesn't come from honest work. He glanced at Clay and smirked. "Didn't think I'd find you back here," he said. "Guess Thunder Creek's still small enough for news to travel." Daisy Ray Montgomery and Ruby Ann Colton had been walking home from the diner when they spotted the scene unfolding. They paused in the shadows by the fence, whispering. "Who was that?" Daisy asked. Ruby's eyes narrowed. "Not someone who's here for friendly reasons." Evelyn Grace Porter, who had been trailing behind with her notebook, stopped as Baze. "Well," her reporter's instinct sharpening, "if he's looking for Clay, there's a story in it, a dangerous one." Travis stepped forward, trying to ease the tension. "Clay, this is Bo's cousin Clayton's, worked with bulls his whole life." Clay's eyes never left the man. "And?" The stranger smiled thinly. "And I've got a buyer interested in Midnight Storm, someone who can pay more than any rancher in this county." The words hung in the cold air, thick with implication. Midnight Storm wasn't just valuable, he was a living reminder of the day Charlotte Whitmore died, and Clay knew selling him would bury the truth for good. Bo shifted uncomfortably. "That bull's not for sale," he said firmly. The stranger shrugged. "Everything's for sale if the price is right." Clay stepped down from the barn doorway, closing the distance between them. "Not this," he said, his voice quiet but edged with steel. Midnight Storm snorted from his stall, the sound rolling through the night like distant thunder. The man's smirk faded just enough to show he'd gotten the message. Still, he leaned closer to Clay. "You can't protect that bull forever. People have long memories in this town." and some of them remember more than you'd like." With that, he turned back toward the truck. As the taillights faded into the darkness, Clay felt the weight of the stranger's warning settle deep in his chest. Thunder Creek's quiet days were over. Morning broke over Thunder Creek with a sky the color of steel. Clay Harrison had barely slept. The stranger's words from the night before echoed in his mind, mixing with old memories he'd spent years trying to bury. In the Harrison barn, Midnight Storm stood restless, shifting his weight, tossing his head. Clay placed a hand on the bull's neck. "They're coming for you," he murmured. The animal's muscles tightened, as if he understood. Bo McAllister arrived early, his face drawn tight with concern. "I heard from Travis. That buyer's offer isn't just about the money. Whoever's behind it, they've got influence." Clay shook his head. "I don't care who they are. Midnight Storm stays here." Bo hesitated. "Then we'd better be ready, because if they can't buy him, they might try to take him." At the Hitching Post Diner, Daisy Ray Montgomery and Ruby Ann Colton sat at their usual corner booth, their coffee untouched. Evelyn Grace Porter slid into the seat beside them, lowering her voice. "That man from last night? He's staying over at the old Whitmore place. Word is, he's meeting with a couple ranchers this afternoon." Ruby frowned. "Ranchers who've been wanting Clay gone for years." Evelyn nodded grimly. "Exactly." That afternoon, Clay moved Midnight Storm into the smaller training pen behind the barn, where the fencing was higher and reinforced. The bull paced, agitated, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. Bo joined him, hauling a coil of rope and a heavy chain. "If they try to open that gate, they're going to have to tear the whole place apart first." Clay's gaze stayed fixed on the road beyond the pasture. "Then we'll make sure they don't get that far." As the sun dipped low, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon, 2 trucks heading straight for the barn. Clay's stomach tightened. He and Bo took their positions, one by the gate, the other by the barn door. Daisy, Ruby, and Evelyn appeared. At the fence line, their presence silent but resolute. The engines cut off, and 4 men stepped out. The stranger from the night before leading the way. His smile was gone. "Last chance, Harrison. Hand over the bull." Clay stepped forward, the fading light casting long shadows across the yard. Midnight Storm snorted behind him, the sound low and dangerous. "You're not taking him," Clay said, his voice carrying in the still evening air. The stranger's eyes narrowed, his hand signaling the others forward. The tension snapped like a pulled wire. Thunder Creek was about to witness a showdown that would decide more than the fate of a bull. The yard outside the Harrison barn held its breath. 4 men advanced, boots crunching on gravel, eyes fixed on Clay Harrison. Behind him, Midnight Storm shifted, his massive frame tense, nostrils flaring. Bo McAllister moved to Clay's side, his voice low. "We're not letting them pass this gate." Clay gave a short nod, his eyes never leaving the stranger leading the group. The man stopped just short of the fence. "You can't win this, Harrison," he said. "That bull belongs to someone with more power than you can imagine." Clay stepped forward, his voice steady. "Midnight Storm isn't just a bull. He's the last piece of a day this town's been trying to forget. And maybe it's time no one forgets anymore." The stranger's jaw tightened. "You think anyone cares about your little tragedy?" Before Clay could answer, the men moved. One went for the gate latch, another toward the side fence. Bo intercepted the first, shoving him back with the full force of his shoulder. Midnight Storm let out a bellow that rattled the boards, lunging toward the fence where the second man climbed. The sheer force of the animal's charge sent the man stumbling backward into the dirt. The air was thick with shouts, boots pounding, and the metallic clang of the gate holding firm. From the fence line, Daisy Ray Montgomery, Ruby Ann Colton, and Evelyn Grace Porter stepped forward, their voices sharp. "Get off this property. Daisy's shout cut through the chaos. Ruby picked up a length of chain, swinging it just enough to make her point clear. The men hesitated, and that hesitation was all Clay needed. He squared his shoulders, stepping right up to the stranger. "This ends now. You tell whoever sent you that if they want this bull, they'll have to go through me, Bo, and half of Thunder Creek." The stranger's eyes swept the yard, Bo standing firm, the women unflinching, Midnight Storm looming behind Clay like a living wall. Something shifted in his expression, a recognition that this wasn't just about an animal. It was about loyalty, history, and the kind of grit that doesn't break under pressure. Without another word, he jerked his head toward his men. "Let's go." The trucks roared to life, spitting gravel as they disappeared down the road. As silence settled over the yard, Clay turned to Midnight Storm, resting a hand on the bull's broad forehead. The tension in the animal's body eased, his breath slowing. Bo clapped Clay on the shoulder. "Looks like you're home for good now." Clay glanced at the fading sunset over Thunder Creek, the light spilling across the fields Charlotte Whitmore once walked. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Home for good."